Greetings from the Dark Continent, Conscious Caracal here, or Adams Van Sale, and tonight this afternoon rather, I'm joined by a very special guest, Styxhexenhammer, and also by his cat. We'll be seeing if the cat also gives some analysis, but I know a lot of you will be staying just to see what she does. But welcome on the show, Styx. We're going to be talking about not South Africa, but specifically what's going on in your country of origin. And to make a bit more of sense in terms of what the road ahead might look like, and also what's happened since Biden's been inaugurated. So welcome on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on and speak with you again.
Yeah, you actually have been on a previous episode before I came out with my identity and started making videos on camera. But that seems like a very long time ago. So let's start off with something very simple, but something that a lot of people seem to not be in agreement of, whether they be on the right or the left or wherever, and that is what the Biden administration has actually done since his inauguration. I think it's been about 6 weeks. So what's your evaluation? Has the Biden administration pretty much maneuvered and behaved as you expected?
Yeah, well, other than the erasing women thing, I thought that that would be like an alt-right administration with MGTOWs or something, supposedly. Biden has managed to waste trillions of dollars on this so-called stimulus, has gotten us potentially involved, although he hasn't actually moved troops in or anything yet, in a new Syrian conflict, by at least optioning the idea of joining NATO in surging troops back into the region. Iraq, Syria, potentially Afghanistan. We're supposed to withdraw in May, the United States forces, that is, but that's potentially on the table. It's not exactly clear anything else that he's accomplished. By the way, there's actually a Paul Krugman bit from the New York Times. I saw this in RCP today that talks about the Biden boom. And I'm thinking about how funny that is, because the only metric that's used for that, and Krugman was saying there'd be a depression if Trump was elected, so keep that in mind. But the only metric that's used is economic growth in the commercial sense, and that's because a stimulus was given to people, and so they spent more. Now, you can't help but grow the economy. The problem is all these neoliberal propagandists are basically, they've circled the wagons around Joe Biden, because there's no way for him to defend himself. He can't even speak half the time. The other day, he forgot what the Pentagon was called.
Even me as a South African, I don't think would be that confused if I were making a speech there, probably at the premises, I assume. Wasn't it Paul Krugman as well that said that the internet would go the way of the fax machine, that it's just a
Yes, that was in 98, if I remember correctly. And actually, the term legacy media was coined in part because of Krugman's own prediction there. There's an archived article, if you look for it on Google, you can find it, from 1998, actually, using the term legacy media to refer to initial newsprint and cable news networks and how they weren't getting onto the internet enough. And part of that was Krugman. He's almost centrally responsible for the death. We should probably thank him, because the reason that why we reach a lot of people between the two of us is because he encouraged them to make a mistake. It's wonderful.
Well, I think you could call that a legacy of some sorts. Something I've noticed in South Africa, specifically being as someone on the outside looking in, our media here pretty much idolizes your media in the US. They try to pretty much copy that model very to their own peril. But at the same time, analysis, even from this side, from more alternative sources, seem to not really be in agreement in terms of what type of administration the Biden administration really is, or rather, to be more specific, what its ideology is. Now, you could say it's a neoliberal administration, but pretty much, as I see it, it's a return to normal. And there's a reason why they say it's now a return to normalcy after Trump has been out of office. But how do you see the Biden administration in regards to what it actually is in terms of its aims and its vision and its ideology?
Well, I would say it's a return to abnormal, because it really isn't until after Ronald Reagan that the American government was no longer expected to represent American interests. And this is a problem in other governments around the world as well. It's not just the US government that has this issue. The idea of globalism is sold as we're all going to work together, we'll have peace and stuff like that. But really what it is it's about, like if you look at the trade deals like the TPP, it's about Vietnam and Japan sign a trade deal. A Japanese billionaire can go into Vietnam, run roughshod over small Vietnamese businesses, put them out of business, and appropriate more wealth. A Vietnamese billionaire can do the same in Japan. That's really, this is what globalism ultimately is about. It's not a return to normal. It's a return to the post-Soviet Union abnormal, in which there's a monopolar world. The West is only interested in appropriating more wealth into the hands of the wealthy. And the problem is those people donate to our political systems, and then they get kickbacks. It's as simple as that. It's very simple political corruption. It's not even leftism. It's just corporatism. It's leftism in the sense of being highly centralized, but it's not leftism in the sense of like hippies or wanting like a lot of welfare or anything. It's leftism in the sense just of hypercentrality. It's an oligarchy. Really, the leftists have actually created the oligarchy that they sought to avoid and initially were very afraid of.
Well, it sounds like it's then just a continuation of pretty much the Clinton, the Bush, and then the Obama administration. This is just the next chapter in that 4-chapter book, it seems.
Yeah, like when Herbert Walker was talking about the New World Order. That's just a neoliberal world order of corporatism. We see this with pharma companies actually at the moment. There's a reason why, and I won't get too much into it because we are on YouTube. There's a reason why what we would consider alternative treatments aren't being embraced in the Western sense, in the sense of patents and studies and so forth. It's because there's money to be made in vaccines. And that's all well and good, but there's a reason why those studies aren't actually being done in the United States. There's a reason why they're not being done in like Canada or something like that. It's all corporatism. It's neither particularly leftism nor is it far right. Each side gets bogged down in declaring that the other side is responsible for their problems. Really, other than the centrality itself being ostensibly leftist, there is no side actually that's responsible for it. Not in the case of little people. Some random self-proclaimed communist LARPing on the internet is certainly not responsible for Amazon burning books.
But in terms of sides, do you think there is really a way to distinguish between the people that are your allies and the people that are your enemies? Is there a very clear line, or do you think it's very much a nuanced matter that you can't really make that simple?
It can be nuanced, but I mean, as far as my ideology, I would just say if a person promotes freedom and liberty and just, they want to be left alone, leave others alone, they're automatically a friend and ally. They're not doing anything wrong. If a person believes that there's any power structure in the world that should be abusing other people that they don't agree with, whether it's a state, a church, a council, a democratic organization, a bunch of voters, then I would say that that's wrong. I would say it's ethically wrong, and if you look at history, it's also incredibly dangerous.
And something that I have picked up on seeing as I've watched your channel for quite a while and enjoy your content, you frequently mentioned the term paradigm shift, and we talked about it the first time when you were on my show years back. But maybe first, before we continue in regards to before we continue with what's happening in the US. Are we currently in the middle of a paradigm shift? Is one approaching? Has one already passed? Where specifically on that timeline are we? But maybe before you answer that, just a quick explanation of what a paradigm shift is.
Well, that's just an overall shift within a political or social situation. That is that things, the way that they were before, have changed considerably enough that you could categorize them and you could proclaim them to be different enough to be part of a different epoch, a different era, a different time. I would say we're in one and we're towards the end of it. I always use the idea of it's darkest before dawn. Right now you see a huge amount of corporate censorship, a huge amount of state corruption, all sorts of problems, not just in the United States, but all over the world. I believe that the extreme problems that are being created eventually will fall out of favor even with the average person in culture. The lemmings of culture, the small minds, eventually will realize something is wrong and they'll demand a stop to it. They always have before. I think they will this time. The biggest threat, I think, is that in the internet era, with this being the first major moral panic other than maybe like Harry Potter or something, and that doesn't really count. That's before modern social media. In the modern sense, this is the first time we've had a major paradigm shift within our politics. This is the first time since the Reagan administration in the United States or that general era in the 1980s worldwide. There was a huge change in politics. You have Thatcher, you have Gorbachev, and so forth. The danger, I think, really, at the end of the day, is that because of the information generation existing, it will be acted upon differently than in the past. In the past, we've always gotten past these moral panics because eventually people come around to the fact that it's nonsense. They realize that World of Warcraft didn't cause serial killers. They realized that Dungeons and Dragons didn't cause Satanism. They realized that Satanism didn't cause actual devil worship. My worry is that at least some part of society won't recognize it this time because of the massively pervasive amount of corporate propaganda we see from groups like Google or Facebook.
Well, you saw that in 2016, basically, when before the real big corporate crackdowns really happened with big tech, is that the internet was relatively a lot more free than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you were to search a news story that you covered, your video would be one of the first results on the YouTube algorithm. Now it's almost impossible. I've done the test with some of my videos. If you copy and paste a direct title from one of my videos that's very specific, you put it into the YouTube algorithm, it's not even on the first page. You get what they call preferential content creators, or
priority creators. Yeah, YouTube initially. And initially, it wasn't even a bad idea. This is the frustrating part. The initial idea actually made sense, which is you had a corporate brand or a significant creator who has been on the platform for 5-10 years. They've done nothing wrong. You assume that if there's a flagging raid towards them, that it's illegitimate. That was a big problem 10 years ago on YouTube, was flagging raids. Even larger creators could get down for days at a time simply because a bunch of people dogpiled them. It was a flame raid. It was a manner of trolling. I remember this very well. But then they decided, if they're a priority creator and they're a corporate brand, we'll just put them up in the rankings. We'll knock everyone else out of the related videos.
But I think what's very revealing about those priority creators is that Fox News is also a priority creator. So it's not even that, I mean, a lot of people hold Fox News up on this pedestal that it's this renegade news network, but it's also just a corporate media company. So of course it'll also be on the priority list. But that also shows, to me at least, that there's not really, it's not just an ideological skew when it comes to this type of bias. There's a definite corporate skew. It's about who wants to make money and how they can do it.
Yeah, Fox News is the same exact type of multinational corporation as CNN, and there are people who don't understand that. They think here's the thing, like through doing that, through allowing Fox on there and ignoring pleas by maybe ideological leftists to can them from the priority system, what YouTube and similar sites can do is say, well, we're providing balanced commentary. Well, there's no actual balance. Fox just represents a different flavor of the same blandness of neoliberalism. They are exactly the same. They're exactly the same as MSNBC or something. But people, who are part of that boring lemming-like centrist core will say, well, they're allowing Fox, so I guess that actually big tech is actually balanced. Now, of course, they've purged in the same period thousands of content creators that actually have libertarian or nationalistic or even leftist ideas. But that will be presented as a sort of balance. The balance that you're allowed to have is basically the RhinoCon mainline GOP and similar parties around the world, and then the neoliberal Dems and similar bland neoliberals around the world. Well, they're not even that different from each other. They deviate on like 2 issues.
And yeah, we've had a few questions in the chat, and one of them that caught my eye was pretty much, and this relates to what we're talking about here in regards to paradigm shifts. Now that Trump is out of office and you are able to really retrospectively look at his 4 years in office, as someone that backed him from the start, what was your thoughts there? What's your evaluation in regards to how disruptive he was or what he achieved?
I think he did a very good job. I think he's the best president since Ronald Reagan. And that's not saying a huge amount. I don't consider him to be a god emperor or even an excellent president, but I do consider him to be good, which is something that we haven't gotten in a while. First president since Carter not to either start a new war or exacerbate an existing conflict. Did deliver on tax reform, did get rid of the ACA mandate, did reform the VA, did get the ball rolling on comprehensive border security, although he was stymied so much that he wasn't able to complete the job. He did the progress that he made, considering the fact that for the first 2 years he couldn't even get the GOP to greenlight it, was actually fantastic. I would give him high marks as a president. I'd say he was a 6 out of 10. The last time we've had a president that I would give that same score was JFK, or maybe even Eisenhower. It's been quite some time. As far as how much he disrupted the swamp, I don't think he did so much in the legal sense, like as actual president. They didn't get disrupted at all. But what he did was get the ball moving on people resisting that neoliberalism, actually recognizing there is a way other than globalism, which, again, since the late 1980s, they've been inculcated into this idea in the United States and elsewhere that we have to be one world. Our government primarily doesn't represent us. It primarily represents a chunk of a world government. And we need to sacrifice enormous amounts of wealth, productivity, and our way of life, our way of thinking, in order to appease other people around the world, including religious zealots, literal terrorists, literal fascists around the world, communists. Well, nobody wants that anymore. Even the blue MAGA types, you look, this is something that needs to be said. If you look at a lot of Biden's fans, they're basically saying make America great again, and they just disagree on how to make America great. They've been trumped and they don't even realize it. Even the leftists realize it, and it's hilarious to see them flounder around and not even know what's going on. They don't have any counter to it. It's the best thing ever.
Well, that's why I like this blue anon meme so much, because it pretty much just exposes that quite brilliantly.
Well, I don't even think it's really a meme. I mean, it is a reality. There are people out there that are neoliberals and they believe literal conspiracy theories. Like some of these people still think that Trump hired Russian hookers to pee on the Obama's bed. I don't know, dude. I don't know where exactly they got the idea that that was legitimate from, but it certainly it wasn't from the alt media.
So now in a post-Trump world, I think you could call that a mini paradigm shift to a certain extent. Where do you see, because I mean, a lot of people are saying, or trying to analyze where this Trump base is going. I mean, this is millions of Americans that are going to vote for someone in the next election. A lot of people saying they're going back to just voting for neocons. A lot of people saying they're going to vote for a more populistic candidate. Where do you see this base pretty much channeling their energy? I mean, I can't see it going away. It's just going to be channeled somewhere else.
Well, it depends on if Trump runs. If Trump runs, I think that a dry run for a potential 2024 Trump candidacy is the midterms. He has very specifically deviated himself from the RNC, and he's backing a slew of candidates that are opposing people that voted to impeach him. He's going to be looking very carefully at who wins those primaries. If Trump's candidates largely are carrying it, I believe he will run again. If they get clobbered, if the mainline GOP reconsolidates, he'll probably just end up being a sideshow. He could screw with the Republicans. He could endorse the Democrat. He's sworn off starting a third party, but he could start an independent candidacy, something like that. My gut feeling is that candidates that he backs, because they tend to be younger and more well-spoken, will generally win. He will look at that and he will seriously consider a 2024 run. And if he does, and with the midterm wins and presumably other legislative wins in 2024, he would be in a really good position to potentially become president. He'd be the first and only other person since Grover Cleveland to have 2 non-consecutive terms. It's a possibility. I know there are a lot of people who think that can't happen. Some people point to his age. He'll be the same age as Joe Biden is now. Age obviously is no longer a problem in presidential runs.
So do you see, I mean, it is a far way off, but just from the signals you're seeing around you now, do you see 2024 as a opportunity for not specifically the GOP, but more of the MAGA-minded people, or people that are, as you would say, liberty-minded people, to gain another victory or to actually win back some ground? Or do you think we might be in for a bit of a dark winter, as Biden would put it?
Well, I would say the old establishment is dying. It's just a matter of how long it takes its corpse to rot into the ground. It's already been slain. The old establishment died in 2016. Now, the left is increasingly abandoning the neoliberals, too. You saw there was actually a Daily Beast article earlier today, and they tweeted about it, and I thought this was hysterical, where they were talking about the dirtbag left, which I call them the cringe fringe myself, because I'm not a leftist. No, but the idea that there are these irreverent politically incorrect leftists that hold to, socialistic or even communistic views, but they don't hold to the social justice warrior thing, and how they're palling around with the alt-right. And it's terrible and it's terrifying. And I was thinking to myself, this is basically an admission by the Daily Beast, which is it's leftist, but in the older sense, that they're dying. The old left, the neoliberals, the neocons, arguably the old conservatives, they're all boomers. They're literally dying. They're going into the ground by the tens of thousands every single day. And younger individuals who have different views are now the ones taking the reins of power. They can't chop the heads off all the Strom Thurmondite-style boomers in the Senate and put them on life support machines and have them sit there forever, like they did to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. At some point, they're going to have to give up the ghost, and they're going to have to give up the reins of power to people who have drastically different views. I think Gen X is considerably more libertarian, especially in a technocratic sense. And the millennials have a sort of left, vaguely libertarian view that the boomers never had, because we grew up in a different situation from them. They still think if you have a little bit more welfare, it just magically makes the situation better. And that's just not the way it is anymore.
What I found interesting about that Daily Beast article, I also saw it, is that it's pretty much a veiled attack on podcasters. It's not real. All those dirtbag left, or whatever they call them,
they're competitors.
They're pretty much alt media or alt media hybrids. They're not really mainstream figures. And if you really read the article, you realize it's just a veiled attack on their competitors to the business, failing business model of the Daily Beast.
Yeah, imagine that you've set up, a $500,000 studio, and you've got your newsroom, and you've got, your janitors and an accountant and lawyers and all of these things. You've got a literal corporation. You're spending millions of dollars a year. You're taking in money, raking it in through ads and so forth. And then somebody hooks up a webcam and all of a sudden has just as much circulation as you. And they don't even need talent. That's the whole thing. The mere fact that they're more engaged with their audience is why they're winning. People on the right have been doing this. People on the left now are doing it. I think that the first wave, arguably, were libertarians, though. I think the first wave of true independent content creation that was truly engaged and an endangerment to the legacy media arguably comes from the Ron Paul era. And specifically initially was aimed at the Republican base, actually at the CPAC types with Mitt Romney, and completely destroyed them. And that's why Obama got reelected, which I think is hysterical.
Well, it's very interesting to see the exact same patterns materializing in America, also materializing in South Africa in regards to the media. I saw an article earlier this year. It's actually quite stunning that when you see the circulation drop in many of these newspapers, it's like 40%, 50%. I think the best performing newspaper in South Africa dropped by 30%. That was the best performing number.
Ouch.
So the model is definitely on the out. And exactly what you said there, it's not 100% this reason, but one of the big reasons is the fact that people can't interact. I remember back in the day, at least when these big corporate media companies were moving onto the internet, they still had open comment sections. A lot of people actually had a lot of fun there.
CNN was great back in the day.
But then they started closing them down. I mean, a good example of CNN counterpart in South Africa is News 24, and they for example, their live stream chat used to be open, and it used to be just this absolute chaotic tornado of content and opinions and people advertising witch doctors and stuff for being in South Africa. But now it's gone. Now it's been disabled, and that element is gone. So now what's happening is that people are coming to streams like this, where they can interact with the person hosting the stream. They can take part in the chat. They can ask questions. They actually contribute to the content. I think that's such a valuable thing about alt media, is that the viewers actually contribute to the content. They are part of the content being created. I think that's something that the mainstream media is missing.
And there's a lot of collaboration and stuff like that. Like, how many times does a CNN host and a Fox News host get together and say, we're going to do a joint podcast for 4 episodes or something like that? It never happens. Technically speaking, if people are watching like news and current events content, technically people like us, in a way at least, no offense, but we're technically competitors if we're covering the same story on the same day as a current event. the listings, you each get your own slot, and you're competing to be higher on the list. And we'll both get screwed by priority creators, but generally speaking, that would be a form of competition. The legacy media can't do that, though. They're incapable of doing what we're doing right now by structure because of contracts. And it costs so much money. Can you imagine, like, even a fairly sophisticated setup, like let's say a really good home office, maybe 10 grand you drop on it. That's a lot of money, but it's not $1 million. It's not nearly the same as what these people spend in a single year for their maintenance. The inefficiency, I think, of the legacy media is what's drowning them. And I love to see it because they are propagandists. They donate money to political causes. Then they get kickbacks in the form of interviews and things like that. And then they sell it on TV and they make that money back. I don't think Joe Biden will be going on Fox anytime soon either, which is, the funny part.
And Jan, on that same note, you also see this emergence of woke capital, or pretty much all these corporations jumping on ideology. Pretty much the funniest thing that you're seeing here happen is that it's pretty much capitalism figuring out how to monetize Marxism or cultural Marxism. It's actually quite ironic, but it makes sense within the bigger picture. But do you see this trend continuing, or do you think it's going to burn out very quickly and then it's not going to be the norm anymore?
I think people are starting to lose interest in the woke side of things. The corporations won't stop doing it till it stops being profitable, though. Right now, if Burger King can say women belong in the kitchen, which they did the other day, they deleted that tweet, by the way, update from this morning, which is hysterical, and then defined it like, oh, no, we didn't actually mean that. It was meant to be a joke. It's like, okay, everyone knows that, but they're just taking the piss out of you. If they want to do that, they're doing it to sell more burgers. Once they get to the point where they do that and they sell less burgers, all of a sudden they're going to become traditionalists, and it's going to be funny. It'll be like night and day in a 24-hour period.
Well, I actually called it as well when I saw that tweet. I think it was 2 hours after it went up. I think my comment was, "This is the closest thing today you're going to see to the tweet equivalent of a time bomb." I mean, you could feel the pressure building.
It was the replies were so amazing. I archived it there, and some of the replies are on there. It's like that's gonna be memorialized forever. And as an example of what not to do when you've got a corporation worth $7 billion.
And that tweet is also going to become like a reaction image. I can see it already being immortalized as a meme. It's never going away. I mean, the internet is forever. But wait till MGTOW starts scarfing down the Whoppers. Yeah, who knew that Burger King was actually based? So I think something that's, you touched on it now, and it's something you cover quite a lot, specifically on your YouTube channel, ironically, and that's alt tech. And you're one of the YouTubers that has actually very impressively been able to migrate your audience over to alt tech websites that have actually been quite obscure to only recently. I mean, how many subscribers do you have on BitChute now?
130,000, I think.
Yeah,
I'd actually have to check. I mean, it goes up quite a bit each day.
Yeah, and that's a considerable amount of your about 400,000.
135,000 actually.
Yeah, and that's a very big chunk of your YouTube audience. And I mean, but you did it very strategically by putting exclusive content on there and whatever. But before I have been outstripped by X22 Report, though, sadly. So Clankdom is now number 2 on BitChute. We must change this someday, by the way. You should turn it into like that PewDiePie T-Series rivalry and mobilize the Clankdom. Exactly. But yeah, on that topic, do you see the future of political commentary, other types of content finding a home on alt tech? Do you see that as the future? Do you see this as a new, not a new dawn, but a new paradigm in regards to content creation? Or do you think it will always be more of a vestige or more of just like a supplement to the mainstream sites? Oh, no, I think that these sites will definitely be taking off. The thing is, when you've got between BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, not necessarily Dailymotion, they're not alt tech, although I still use them, Brighteon and some of these, PewTube, you've got maybe 1% of the video hosting market share. Imagine that they only get to the point where they have 5%. That's not even that much, but that's still 5 times more than they have today, despite all of the successes they already have and evaluations in the multi-millions of dollars range, millions and millions of users and views, up the ass.
if a person has become large on these sites, which do not algorithmically throttle their users, and these sites quadruple or pentuple their size, the amount of attention, number one, is huge. The amount of potential money-making opportunity is also large. And then here's what happens. Once these sites become truly proficient at marketing themselves, and they are, once they gain that initial monetization, they become profitable. Other people, the normies of society, will begin pouring onto these sites. And once that happens, people who have already distinguished themselves, they're riding the gravy train. A person, I think, if you're a content creator that does anything in regards to current events, politics, edgy humor, satire, things like that, if you're not on at least one of these main alt tech sites, you're doing yourself a disservice. And what I would say is other people that aren't into that at all and do mundane things, maybe you make videos hula hooping or something, YouTube is in 5 years not going to be the only main site that hosts that kind of content. If you're not on other sites, again, you're also doing yourself a disservice. There's a reason why I've spent literally years trying to popularize these sites. It's not all for my own benefit. I genuinely believe that a large proportion of the user bases of places like YouTube, Facebook will be deplatformed over the next few years. And if a person wants to have a voice, they're not going to be able to have it there anymore.
Yeah, well, that's one of the big uses of having an alt tech presence is that you have a life raft. I mean, that's what we saw happen with Computing Forever, one of the YouTubers that was...
But yes, by the way, actually the 4th user on BitChute to hit 100K as of literally this morning.
That's excellent. I mean, that's what happened to him when he was removed from YouTube. He just pretty much, without even flinching, just went over to alt tech. He already had a presence there. And now he's continuing as usual. And in regards to the numbers that you're getting in terms of views, it doesn't seem to be that big of a dent. It seems to be slowly but surely matching up with YouTube as well.
It's actually, I compared it. And if I compare the number of views with the number of subscribers, I'm getting more now on BitChute than I am on YouTube. And even before I was algorithmically throttled, the ratio was very, very similar. I'm getting almost 100,000 views a day on my BitChute content. And that's in addition to the thousands and thousands of views on Odyssey and Rumble and all of these other sites. Even on Dailymotion, I think I've become the 3rd largest creation channel on the entire network. And you know, my content isn't even edited. I sit there and talk into a webcam. And there are all of these people that have great talent, and they little or no capitalize upon the possibility of alt tech. Can you imagine, like, if PewDiePie tomorrow says, "Hey, I'm joining Rumble," I'd have 1 million subscribers by the end of the day. He'd make unfathomable amounts of money as well. And that profit motive, by the way, some people will look askance to that. I'm a capitalist. I don't have any problem with the idea of people making money off of their own personal effort.
Well, I think that was one of the big blunders of Trump, was that he didn't embrace alt tech. I mean, imagine the timeline of events if he actually did, if he just created one account on an alternative tech site. Yeah,
exactly. If he had gotten onto if he had gotten onto Gab or Parler or something, he probably would have crashed the site. So probably that was out of an abundance of caution. But if he had some roundabout presence on these sites, it would have been very helpful. I don't think he's going to do that, though. Because he's Trump, he's more likely to have video hosting on Trump.com or something like that, in all honesty.
Here's an interesting comment from the Freighter Watcher who says, "I've made a conscious effort to watch alt platforms only using YouTube if the content isn't available anywhere else." Is this something you would endorse, Styx?
Yes, absolutely. I think that creators should begin making at least some exclusive content on the sites. You can use a hybrid approach like I have. Go ahead and put content on YouTube. YouTube is a huge site. It has a huge amount of audience. You can potentially grow to huge degrees. Put some content just on other sites. It doesn't really take that much effort. And if we can popularize those sites so YouTube as a competitor, even if those competitors by and large are a lot smaller, so long as they can put any pressure on YouTube whatsoever, it forces YouTube to stop purging people the same way that it is now in order to try to compete.
I mean, I would describe the past paradigm on the internet pretty much as the centralization of the internet quite gradually. But do you think what we're seeing here is the very first buds or starting of a decentralization movement?
I would like to believe so, but it'll need more new technology, and crypto, I think, will be a part of that. There's a reason why all of the big wigs who aren't buying into crypto are lashing out at it and saying, "Oh my God, it's going to fund terrorism and human trafficking." Well, yeah, exactly. You haven't bought into it. You're short selling it, and you're trying to get people not to jump aboard because you're afraid that they'll have upward mobility and be able to do transactions without your blessing.
No, absolutely. And in other than alt tech, where would you say, is there any other space in the internet or corner of the internet or new development that you would think people need to keep an eye on in regards to some very exciting stuff happening in regards to the decentralization that I just mentioned?
Well, sometimes the old can become new. Again, like the way I use Daily Motion, it's older than YouTube, and it has a relatively low actual active user base. But you can make leeway on that if you try hard enough. One thing is that a lot of people, they think that they're going to become massively successful by making a video a month. That's not typically how it works. It's possible. Sometimes you have to be a workhorse, though. And the other problem, this is the biggest problem with the internet, is the declining rate of return because more and more people keep making content. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got a flood of people making it. And what we compete for isn't subscribers. I can subscribe to you, myself, and 10,000 other people. It's not a problem. What we compete for is time usage. People need to understand that. A person only has a certain amount of time each day that they interact with other people's content and or make their own content. The problem is that you have too many people actually making content. And 99% of them get almost no actual interest in the content, by the way, and sometimes they get demoralized and they stop. Sometimes they keep doing it. It's very intriguing, actually, how it works, because it used to be that you competed mainly for subscribers or for views, for attention. Then we realized that not two views aren't necessarily created equal. One person goes onto your content, watches a video for 30 seconds, and leaves. It's a view. Another person watches the whole 15-minute video and leaves. It's still the same view. It's counted the same way by YouTube or Facebook or anything like that, but they're not the same.
And yeah, in regards to that, I mean, we've seen internet censorship ramping up quite significantly. I think we're almost at quite clownish levels, or not almost, I think we're already there. Maybe to simplify things a bit, do you have any practical suggestions on how people can resist this type of censorship if they are content creators specifically, or even just viewers of content creators that might be affected by this type of censorship?
Yeah. Number one, get on alt tech. And number two, popularize alt tech. There are so many very talented creators. They have a BitChute channel and they're on Odyssey and all these other things, but they don't even tell anyone on their mainline platforms that they're on those. They'll make one video saying, "Oh, by the way, guys, I got on Rumble, so here's the link." Then they never talk about it again. They don't even include the link in their new videos. That's a huge mistake. That's how you fall behind the handful of competitors that are actually doing what I'm attempting to do, which is popularize my alt presences as much as possible. Another thing is to make yourself censorship resistant. You've got to choose your battles. There are some people, they go crazy. They get a strike on YouTube and then they make the N-word video or something and get themselves destroyed and they get kicked off Patreon and Twitter and everything. Choose your battles wisely. The third thing that I would say, get into crypto. Officially, disclaimer, by the way, I'm not giving you fiscal advice, but I think that will be useful in the future as it gains more notoriety. Also, language creoles. This is something that I return to. There are certain times that you can say what you really want to say, even if it would technically be bannable, as long as you use some intriguing words. Because computers are very, very bad. And then keep in mind, most of the moderation on these sites is automated at this point. It's robots. They're very, very bad at judging language creoles. They're extremely bad at telling context, which also leads to people occasionally getting strikes when they haven't done anything wrong simply because they use the wrong word.
No, those are actually very interesting practical solutions. Something that I think people also are talking about less, but people, it's still a relevant issue, and that is the lockdowns and the Great Reset and whatever. You staying in Amsterdam, the city of my ancestors, or one of my ancestors, how's it looking around you there in Europe in regards to the lockdowns and the regulations? Are things dying down? What's the story on the ground?
Well, the irony is I couldn't tell you about Europe because I don't think you can actually travel outside of the Dutch borders at the moment. So that should give you a good indicator about Europe as a whole, I guess. Here in the Netherlands, other than going into stores or on mass transit and having to put a mask on, really, at this point, I think things are basically opened back up. And initially, there were months and months there that there was almost no reaction to the coronavirus other than that initial in like, what was it, April, that buying frenzy where all the toilet paper was gone and stuff. And Liz very wisely made me get an extra 8-pack of toilet paper, which initially I was like, whatever. And we would have run out and that would have been very, very unpleasant. But we got the canned beans and we got the rice and everything else, but TP applies. Things here are a little bit more laissez-faire. Like fairly recently, back in February, I went back to the United States for a few weeks. I can tell you that small town America, at least in the sense of Vermont, is so much more hard ass about this disease than the Dutch here are. People here are taking it much more in stride. They're going about their business and sort of shrugging their shoulders, whereas people even in Rutland, and this isn't a far left part of Vermont, are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. There's like mask signs, quarantine signs everywhere, people with 2 masks on, walking their stroller down the street, and it's just nuts.
No, well, I have to thank you for that advice to buy the toilet paper, because there was in South Africa also a massive run on toilet paper, and then I didn't have a problem, so that actually helped out quite a bit.
Well, I had forgotten to remind people about the toilet paper. I was thinking about what went in and not went out, and I was like, oh shit.
No, I figured it was more your advice just to make sure you have everything that you might need, and I kind of figured that toilet paper might be an issue.
Imagine you stock up on baked beans and like frozen burritos and stuff, but then you don't get the toilet paper.
Well, it's as you
the
said,
biggest mess ever.
As you said, you buy all the cans and then you didn't buy a can opener. Well, here in South Africa, things are also very interesting when it comes to the lockdown. We pretty much have all these phases and all these levels. We're currently on level 1. And it seems like we introduced the world to a variant of COVID as well. So that's our name in the news. But do you think, if you are looking at this, I mean, it's now been almost exactly a year since the lockdowns globally really started. Do you think there's any bright side to what has happened in the past year? Any positive developments that have come from it that might be, in the long term, actually very good or positive?
Yeah, a lot more parents are homeschooling. That's been. I can't really think of that many bright sides to it. I guess the propaganda has become so gargantuan and so obvious that some people that otherwise would be like shrugging their shoulders are starting to get hip to the fact that they're being lied to all day. Other than that, in the homeschooling, though, mainly it's just a huge authoritarian power grab at this point. Now, they're still ranting about like COVID passports and Fauci saying, well, you need 3 masks on. And it's like, Jesus, it's going to be spring in a week. It's going to be like 80 degrees in parts of the Southland in the United States. You're not going to be able to convince people to wear 3 masks. You'll be lucky to get them to wear 1 in a place that's air conditioned, of all places.
Yeah, and in South Africa, I can say there was a massive positive effect from it in regards to the old media. Here, there's been just an absolute boom since March 2020 in regards to subscriber numbers, viewer numbers on alternative commentators' channels. And that's because people have, firstly, I think, just seen how the media have just been bootlickers for the current administration here in South Africa. And secondly, people have been hungry for content. They've been stuck at home. They want to watch something, maybe not something brain dead as Netflix, maybe something a bit more stimulating. So they found a lot of these alternative channels by chance. And
so they're doing alt tech and chill, I guess, now.
Yeah, and it's been, and I can say it's been a very apparent boost for the South African podcasting sphere, commentating sphere, content creation sphere. And now there's a very nice foundation going forward. So that's one of the positive things that's happened here. But I think the next step would then naturally be to usher in an alt tech presence as well.
Yeah. Didn't they attempt to ban alcohol there or something like that, or transporting alcohol?
Not attempt, they did. They banned alcohol and they banned cigarettes. They also banned...
What a good way to get riots. You're stuck at home, you can't even get drunk.
No, I made my own alcoholic ginger beer, and I made some cider. It turned out very nice. That's also a positive effect in my life, is that I learned.
You can start a brewery and become a billionaire. You see, you can become one of the billionaires now.
One of my friends actually started a brewery called Boer Beer, that people can make their own beer in their backyard or in their house.
That's legal there? Because in the United States, like without a liquor license, I think that's a federal crime.
Yeah, you can make your own beer if you want. But yeah, they banned cigarettes, they banned alcohol, they banned grilled chicken at the shops. You couldn't buy hot food. They banned certain types of clothing. You could buy shoes, but you couldn't buy sandals. The South African government also, in regards to COVID relief, had a race-based COVID relief strategy. So only certain businesses that were owned by a certain percentage of, for example, Black South Africans were to get relief from the relief fund. It was really a strange time. And then I saw the Biden administration a few weeks ago also considering using race as a criterion in COVID relief, and I thought, well, they might have been copying the homework of our administration here in South Africa,
or Mugabe. No, I think they gave that up in favor of just depriving people who are within the middle class of their full COVID relief. I think they for this last $1,400 stimulus, I think it starts phasing out when you make 72,000 or something a year, and it's like, okay, that's a nice income, but the problem is if you're basing that on the previous year's actual income estimates, a lot of those people have been fired or furloughed. They don't have any money.
And I see here someone's reminded me as well, and this is going to trigger you, Styx. Seeds and gardening supplies were also banned in South Africa during the lockdown.
See, that's the worst idea ever, because I would think that if productivity is going to fall, more people are going to have to do some home gardening.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess you can go out into the savannah, I guess, and shoot a lion and eat it or something.
No, but that's what they did. It really appeared as if they just put policies or things that they wanted to ban on a dartboard and threw darts at it. And it's been an interesting time in South Africa. The current administration has done some bizarre things, and then you have the mainstream media also calling it the president's speech is majestic and Churchillian. And we need to back the president now. We need to back this administration. Really speaking truth to power, you know.
I remember they did that with Cuomo, but also on the first day, of the inauguration, I remember there was a piece that they put out. Actually, I think it was MSNBC, if I remember correctly, where Biden came out of the plane and someone was being really hyperbolic and theatrical, and they're like, "Oh, and when Biden opened the door and came down the steps, the clouds parted. It was raining before. Now there was a little sun. This be a sign." And I was thinking to myself, there are actually people out there that take the mainstream media seriously. Can you imagine, if we waxed poetic like that on our channels, people would think we were nuts. They think that we were devolving. They think, okay, this is going to become the drug channel.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the contrast that's come to the fore, is that, I mockingly said that they're speaking truth to power, but that's exactly what they say they're doing. They say that they are the only thing standing between us and tyranny, and they defeated fascism. What did they call it? The removing of Trump. They say that it was a strengthening of democracy, or they used this very specific term, like a bolstering or a.
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah, they pretty much openly said it was pretty much a mainstream or
fortifying of the election.
They fortified the election.
Fortified.
Yeah. Well, that's
and if you substitute the term falsified, then you get banned. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the word game that we're playing here. It is definitely in terms of the culture war, it's definitely a language war as well, in terms of what words we use, what type of concepts we promote, what type of concepts we use. And you touched on it earlier when you said certain concepts you can't even talk about. But there's definitely a mimetic war going on, but not mimetic in just strictly the internet funny picture sense. Mimetic in the sense of the idea or cultural DNA being pretty much, or cultural genes being spread.
Well, linguistic propaganda is the most important part in human communication. This is why the label Blue Anon was downed by Urban Dictionary and blocked by Google. They're terrified of it because it encapsulates, it sounds similar to QAnon, and it encapsulates the same basic concept but aims it at the other side and shows people, hey, You're just as susceptible to propaganda too. It's just that the lies that you believe are X, Y, and Z instead of A, B, and C. And these groups, these corporate entities, are terrified of that because it's effective propaganda. It is propaganda, by the way. I would label it benevolent, but it is the same basic concept. It's memetics. There's a reason for that specifically. And they're afraid that people will actually look in the mirror and say, oh shit, what I believe in actually is not true. I've been lied to. Let me find out who's been doing the lying. Oh, it's big tech, the MSM, the billionaires that have been basically feeding me horseshit for the last 4 years. It's lies. Oh my God, my worldview is wrong. It's really difficult for people to confront that. But if even a small proportion of them do begin waking up, let's say that 1% of US society wakes up to the fact that the MSM is totally full of it. That's still millions of people. And it's really, it terrifies them because that's a lot of potential money as well.
Mm. Well, as I said, that was the case online before a lot of the censorship happened, as people could easily find these types of sources of or alternative sources of information. This type of mimetic warfare was much easier to do, but people are finding interesting and fascinating new ways of pretty much countering this type of strategy or this type of censorship and getting around it. And something I have noticed, I don't know if you've seen it as well, is that when Trump left office, the right, or whatever you want to call it, online has kind of regained a little bit of its mischievousness. There's a bit more of a playful mischievousness going on again that I actually is quite refreshing.
Well, before people get blackpilled, this is something that I try to bring up every possibility I can, because there are a lot of people that are demoralized and thinking, oh my God, the world's ending. Especially for millennials and Gen Z, it's difficult to understand this. But people have fought back against even more severe state and corporate censorship than we have right now without the benefit of having the electronic era. If you look at the history of the Soviet Union, you'll find there were people who would hand copy books. They'd have a banned book like some poetry from the Romantic period. They would hand copy it, and then they would sell or distribute copies. They would take cassettes and bootleg them at great potential risk to themselves, or they would circulate them. They'd listen to the Depeche Mode cassette, the Iron Maiden cassette, until it was practically falling apart, and hundreds of people would have owned the cassette or been loaning it for some time. Now we have the benefit of the fact that there are at least a few measures on the internet that are largely beyond the capability of the state or of lamestream corporations to censor. We have alt tech, we have peer-to-peer networks, we have cryptocurrency, we have things like email lists that can be generated in a way that's sort of outside of the mainline companies that would normally front them. These things do exist. We have fundraising networks like Subscribestar it's not Patreon. They'll kick you off if you're fomenting violence, but by and large, if you have weird political views, Subscribestar doesn't care. You have the ability to speak at a level, even on these alt tech networks, alone, that is 1,000 times greater than the resistance that was offered up in any prior iteration of censorship in the Western world. The Nazis, the Soviets, communist China, Pol Pot, anything like that. And it didn't exist. It was shortwave. They did shortwave and hand-copied books and cassettes, and that's basically all they had. What I would say is that the one thing holding some people back is that larger content creators, they're losing focus. They're used to having 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, right? And they're saying, well, YouTube is purging people, it's censoring people, but I've got 100,000 subscribers. So when they only have 5,000 on Odyssey or something like that, they feel that it's a problem and they get demoralized. You've still got the expanded ability to speak beyond anything that could have been fomented, imagined in a million years by the dissidents in past movements that fought against tyranny. And the other reason not to get demoralized is name a single one of these tyrannical movements that exist today. They all lose. They are always remembered as the bad guys of history. That's because they are. There's never been a movement that delved into book burning and censoring television or the internet or any of these other movements that ever was any good. They are always the bad guys. And they'll always be remembered as the shitheads that they are. And you're on the right side of history, so keep plowing away at it. Work a little bit harder. Yes, put it an extra hour a week. Make 4 extra videos as alt tech exclusives if you're a content creator. The amount of work that could be done is monstrous. It's insane. Now, content the likes of which people 20 or 30 years ago couldn't have even dreamed of.
Well, people, that is definitely something that gives a lot of hope in regards to. I mean, you mentioned there a lot of people are being blackballed by the censorship and see what they're seeing around them. I do think there is a lot of hope being sown in regards to the leaks, as you explained in the dam. It's much harder to pretty much keep people locked up psychologically and make sure that they can't get access to information that's not really within lockstep with the mainstream. And it's a great thing to see. And yes, it's hard, as you mentioned. And yes, there's going to be some difficulties. It's not going to be like the golden age of YouTube again. But if you work hard now, you're going to reap the rewards. I mean, just as maybe what we should do is we should recolonize MySpace.
Yeah, you probably could. At this point, it probably wouldn't even be hard.
Yeah,
well, I mean, that's not that different from like getting on Dailymotion and trying to make it there. It's from the same era. It's the same basic idea. Yeah, they should. A couple hundred people could probably take over MySpace, more or less. How much is the site worth? $10? Just buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the head of Gab should actually buy MySpace and make.
He probably could afford it. Didn't Timberlake get involved there, and they tried to turn it into like a music thing for a while there, MySpace? And it kind of fell. I think he did.
I can't really recall that, but yeah, it sounds like it could have been something that happened. But yeah, maybe we see something like that happen with one of these dead sites. Is resurrected in a new form and rises from the virtual ashes like a phoenix.
Actually, the idea of buy-ins, really quickly though, is another reason to not be demoralized, because you're starting to see people that are very wealthy buying into not just alt tech but crypto, like with Tesla buying billions in Bitcoin, Wang Hino buying into Rumble to the tune of several $1 million for ads and so forth. Once that begins to happen, once people that have already made it and don't have to worry about being silenced are buying in, that's a signal, or should be a signal, to anyone who's intelligent. You should be buying into to the best of your ability. The best thing about these sites is you don't need money to buy in. All you need is some talent. And all of these content creators with hundreds of thousands, millions of subscribers or whatever, the Facebook page, 50,000 followers, you already have the audience. You don't even need to do anything hardly to buy into these sites.
Well, and that's why I think this is so important to talk about the alternatives that are out there. If you couldn't have connected the dots, that's what ALT stands for. And I think alternatives are great because that is decentralization in action. We can't just keep an oligarchy going. We can't let the perpetual march towards centralization and standardization continue. We have to fight it everywhere we can. And I think that's what you specifically and a lot of other YouTubers and content creators are doing in regards to alt tech and content creation there. But Styx, thank you very much for your valuable time today. Thank you for chatting with me again. It's been a fascinating conversation. The chat's also been big fans of what you've had to say. And maybe I'm just going to give you an opportunity for some final words before we say goodbye.
Yeah, I would just say, don't get demoralized. Fight, fight, fight. I'm allowed to say that because I'm not a registered Republican. Otherwise, they would, charge me with insurrection.
Worst coup ever.
The 2-hour coup.
Yeah, where there wasn't even a single armed person. Anyway, Styx, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And guys, if you don't know who Styx is, there might be some of you in the chat. There's a link to his YouTube in the description. And on his YouTube, you will find links to all his other alt tech sites as well. I couldn't fit them all into the description this time, but you will find that below all of his videos. So definitely go check it out. And then also thank you for tuning in on this unorthodox time for this channel. But yeah, it's been an excellent conversation. I'll definitely be chatting to Styx again somewhere in the future, I hope.
Yes, any time, and it's really great to be on here too. It's a good conversation.
Oh, thank you very much. So cheers, guys. Have a good one. Like Styx said, keep fighting, resist the standardization and centralization, and resist those black pills. They're not worth it. I think that's the cat also saying goodbye.
Yeah, the cat co-host here. And also you got to say peace out as well.
Cheers and peace out.